bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 21st. It is a Tuesday. We don't have a fancy hashtag today because it's not just a Tactics Tuesday. We are going to have a special Tactical Thursday, though, in the afternoon, 4 o'clock, on our twitch.tv/Soccer Down here. Stephen Glass, Atlanta United 2 manager, will be joining us to watch last season's Atlanta United 2 match in Tampa Bay. This was picked by Glassy, and he wanted to give us a bit of a glimpse of how he looks at a match, how he goes through a match, how he talks to his players about a match that's been played. So it'll be a fun time on Twitch, 4 o'clock on Thursday with Stephen Glass, breaking down an Atlanta United 2 game. You'll feel like you're on the team getting that tactical conversation after the match.
Sweet.
Yes, that is true.
No, but I know that it's something that you've been working with Classy to try to figure out when we could do it. I know that was the match that he had circled, but now this will be fun because, it's not every day that you can be in the same channel with a coach and get his, 30,000 foot view of everything going on around him. Now this one will be fun. So, everybody dial it up for your late afternoon. Get your popcorn ready for that one because this one's going to be a hoot. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we got lots of different things to get into today. Proposals for plans, hypothetical plans, real-life plans, real-life debate and consternation. John, kick us off.
We want to talk about Mesut Ozil?
Sure.
All right. Sammy Mokbel from the Daily Mail. Mesut Ozil is resisting Arsenal's efforts to implement a squad-wide 12.5% pay cut. Arsenal on Monday announced, quote, a voluntary agreement with our first-team players, head coach, and core coaching staff, end quote, to cut salaries for a 12-month period. However, there are as many as 3 players who are still to be totally convinced of the necessity to take total pay deductions rather than deferrals, with Ozil understood to be one of those. And by far, he is Arsenal's top weekly earner at £350,000 a week. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is at $200,000. Alexander Lacazette's at $180,000. Nicolas Pepe's at $140,000. David Luiz at $125,000. Hector Bellerin at $110,000. He has made it clear, meaning Ozil, that he'd be willing to take a pay cut in the future, but wants to be sure of the full financial impact of the coronavirus before making a full informed decision. He's open to accepting a deferral worth more than the 12.5%. PFA have advised against players taking cuts.
Okay. Let's parse through this because there's a lot of things going on here. So the club announced yesterday evening that they've reached an agreement with all players and coaching staff on a 12.5% cut for a year. Obviously, that's not true. Or somebody else is making something up. I mean, somebody's wrong here because either everybody agreed or they didn't. And
yes,
it sounds like, according to Sportsmail, that Ozil did not agree. He wants it deferred instead of a cut. And just so you understand, because different clubs are doing this differently, a cut is just you're not going to get that money. A deferral is you're going to get it at generally it's agreed upon, you'll get it at a certain time. I guess there's probably some deferrals that are open-ended about when you'll get it, but generally there's an agreement about when it will happen. Deferred contracts was a thing. Not really much of a thing anymore, but it's been a thing even before, incidents of things like this. Bobby Bonilla is a very famous case of a deferred contract where the Mets signed him, was it like $26 million, but they deferred it over about a 20-year period of time. And I don't know the specifics, and it doesn't matter. Don't start Googling and pounding on your keyboard. The idea is that instead of paying Bonilla $6 million a year for the amount of time they thought he was going to play. They pay him $1 million a year, and I think they're still paying him right now. So he's still getting that. This was a big thing in the ABA when they didn't have money up front, and they'd sign guys to these crazy backloaded contracts and be paying them off years afterwards if they still had any money to pay them off with. So deferrals are nothing new in contracts. In this situation, obviously you understand the impetus to do it. Now, on Özil, Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, not very impressed with this stance. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, Özil's agent came out and said, let's wait and see. Carragher said that wasn't really doing his client much good here. It didn't look good. He said there's 2 strands of players who might not fully engage, and that's a young lad who maybe didn't have the revenue or a player coming to the end of his contract. But the fact the highest paid player hasn't done it, the rest of the squad has agreed it, you've got to go with the rest of the players. As you say, it's a massive PR own goal. That's true. I don't know what Ozil's standing is in the Arsenal locker room, but if everybody else agrees to this and the guy who's making the most doesn't, it's a bad look at a minimum. Neville went at him a little bit stronger, which is not a surprise. He said, I wouldn't like to be one of the 3 who hasn't agreed. It will alienate and isolate them from the rest. When a group of players are voting on something, you go along with it, which is very true. And we'll have to see if there is an issue with this. Again, I don't know what his standing is in the locker room. But here's the issue I have with it. So Ozil's agent, Dr. Erkut Sogut, he said deferral is an option, but not to agree a cut today when the clubs may still make the same profit as last year. This was earlier in the month, by the way. He said what the exact financial impact is on the clubs, we can see 3 to 6 months later, but we can't see it today. I think this is incredibly disingenuous, and I'll tell you why. If people are thinking that games are going to be played in the Premier League in front of crowds to finish this season, they're not paying attention, first off, to the discussions that have been coming from the Premier League about playing behind closed doors. And they're just not paying attention to kind of where things are with this. If you're not playing in front of crowds, your revenue is not going to be the same. That's just obvious. There's no way around that. So that argument is incredibly disingenuous. No problem with a player saying, hey, you signed me to a contract. You did not include any kind of clauses about deferrals or pay cuts in case of natural disaster, pandemic, what have you. You owe me the money. They do, according to the contract. They absolutely do. Now, if you want to sign another contract with that club, well, you're probably not going to after you take that stance. That's a fact, too. Like, that's the thing about all of this. Everybody today, when anything comes up, it is rabble, 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 black, white, nothing is in the middle. It's just, either you're with me or I hate you and you're a stupid moron. That's what everything has turned into. Look, this is a lot more complicated than that. Arsenal's not going to make as much money as they had planned to make. If they pay out what they plan to pay out based off what they plan to make, they're going to lose money. Don't know how much, don't know what kind of reserves they have, don't know if it's going to hurt them in the long run, don't know any of that. But asking for a pay cut and the majority of the group agreeing to take the pay cut, okay, that was what they put on the table, it was agreed to. If a player doesn't want to take it, they don't have to because they have a contract. That's all well and good. But the things pointed out here, it potentially creates a problem in the locker room. Absolutely. If everybody else agreed for the good of the club to give up the money and he didn't, well, that's not a good look. The idea that the revenues could be the same this year, that's just incorrect, and that's just disingenuous. The idea that, okay, if he's late in his contract and he decides, you know what, I'm done with Arsenal and they're going to pay me every dollar that they owe me, okay, that's fine. But is this going to affect future contracts? He's not going to come back to Arsenal if he takes this stance. I think that part's kind of clear. And is it going to affect negotiations with any other club who's going to look at it and say, well, he's not all in for the club. He's all about money for himself. And it's not like Ozil has been tearing it up lately. We've had lots of different conversations about Mesut Ozil and Arsenal over the last few years. So he wants to get paid. He's completely within his right to do so. But yes, it could affect his standing within the locker room, and it will definitely affect his relationship with the club, and it could affect his future contract negotiations with other clubs. And that's the price you pay. Those things are all real. So does Ozil look bad? Yeah, I think he does. Is he 100% entitled to everything in his contract? Yep. Both sides signed it. So you just have to make the decision on what it's worth to you. And that's where you're at right now. But the idea that the agent's putting out there that you don't know the club could make the same amount of money as they did last year, that's completely incorrect. And really just a bad look to put out there in the media, because you look like a fool when you say something like that.
Couple of things over the last season and a half. Ozil's status in the locker room and on the field has been off and on. He's been on the bench for some runs and had to prove himself at the training ground and that he was going to be a team player ready to work for the philosophy that was put in front of him. There are times that he sat. And there are also times in the last season and a half where his status in the locker room, he was not looked upon kindly as a team player for whatever reason. But Sogit also had been interviewed by The Athletic recently, and he says, it is not enough for a club to present a proposal to one member of the first team squad and then ask them to go to the rest of the squad and get their consent to do it. That is not how individual contract negotiations should take place. A club may even ask a first-team manager to negotiate with players, and this may influence some, particularly younger players, or those on the fringe who fear there might be personal repercussions for him if he does not agree. In those circumstances, it could be questionable that any consent from the players would be legally binding anyway, as some players are not in a position to give true consent if they're under pressure to do so.
I'm sorry, the agent's got to stop talking. The more he runs his mouth, the worse it's going to look, and it's he needs to stop. He needs to stop with this nonsense. This is not your everyday situation. This is not even a situation of a club in financial trouble in normal times. This is a little different here. So stop the nonsense. That's just ridiculous. So that's what it comes down to. Has Mesut Ozil been a good signing for Arsenal? He's started more than 30 matches in league play twice. He showed up in 2013. 2 times he played 32 and 35 starts. And hasn't played more than 30 games. Last season he started 20, played in 24. The season before that he started 24, played in 26. It is what it is. I mean, I think it's fairly well understood that he's not long in his Arsenal career. He doesn't have long left. So if he looks at it and says, well, they signed me to the contract, they're going to pay me, okay, that's fine. But don't give me the excuses. Don't give me the nonsense. The agent needs to stop talking because he's not helping himself with anything in the future. Because, Ozil's been linked to a move to MLS. He's been linked with moves to different clubs. He's 31. He's not that old. I would think twice about it after this kind of public stance from the agent. I would. I would think twice about bringing him in because I don't know how truly committed he is to the club. And And this is a big difference in this current situation. I know that there are issues with players not trusting clubs. I totally get that. And again, this is the part that needs to be just very well understood. Arsenal and Mesut Ozil signed a contract to pay him a certain amount. He does not have to take a pay cut. He doesn't. But when the rest of your team does, with maybe one or two other exceptions, and you don't, it's a bad look at a minimum, and it can potentially cause problems currently while you see out your contract and in the future on the next contract, because it could limit the amount of clubs who are interested in signing you if this is the type of stance you take during the situation. So he's owed the money, but it could come at a big cost of future money down the road, and you have to make those decisions on what's more important.
I was going to ask you, but you've brought it up. Would you, with all of this that we've seen from Mesut Ozil in the last year and a half, season and a half, and especially with this that has come out recently, how much thought would you put into bringing a player like this into your team, regardless of whether it's MLS or not? But for me, this is a red flag for me in wanting to bring in a talented player like this because of how it could affect the locker room.
Well, you have to know what you're getting. And if you have a strong locker room and you need a player of Ozil's skills, and he's an incredibly talented player, I've been disappointed of what he's produced in England because of how talented he is. But, if you have a strong locker room and you think you can handle it, you take that chance. We see it all the time in sports where you have a player who it could potentially be some form of trouble, and clubs will take that risk when they need to if they feel like they can handle it, because it's a risk. I wouldn't. If I was MLS, I don't think this is a good look, because the last thing you need is somebody who comes in and is only worried about their contract, because in MLS, star players have other responsibilities. They do have to grow the game. They do have to represent the club in a bigger way. Would he be willing to do that? If he's not willing to help the club in this kind of time, then you have to question it. You do. Could be different. He could learn from this. All those things are possible. But, yeah, this brings things into question. It does. It has to.
Since we're in the Premier League and we didn't get the chance to talk about it yesterday, you want to talk about Newcastle?
Sure.
Let's see. Well, first and foremost, and I appreciate Cuppers looking out for me. He says, besides John popping bottles of dew for Ashley being gone, what are your thoughts on the Newcastle sale? Do you think they'll become regular top four contenders, and is Steve Bruce gone after this season?
So, John, what do you think about the Newcastle deal?
Until it happens, it ain't happening. And sorry, Alex, I was not able to go to the store yesterday, so I have Diet A and W here with me this morning. That's why I wanted to lead off with Mesut Ozil.
So let's go back to something you just said. So say that one more time, the way you just said it.
What, until it happens, it hadn't happened?
No, that's not what you said.
So what did I say?
You said, until it happens, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
That's the stance that makes no sense out of you. It never has. It's one thing to be skeptical, and in this case, absolutely, completely understand being skeptical. It's Newcastle, it's Ashley, he's been in a situation before. This feels a little bit further along, but still. It's okay to be skeptical. But the idea that until it happens, it ain't happening. Not that, well, it's not going to happen yet, or it might not happen, or, there's still questions, or et cetera, et cetera. No, it's just, until it happens, it's not going to happen. So you're going to deny until it happens, and then what? You just say, well, I was wrong.
Mike, I'm a consistent Mike Ashley denier on this show.
No, you're a consistent denier, period. Let's not even try to sugarcoat that at all.
I was just talking specifically about this story. I mean, I know that
let's talk about Miami. Let's talk about Tom Brady. Let's talk about anything that you have denied.
Sure.
And it is that you encapsulated it perfectly just a minute ago.
I'm a serial denier.
No, until it happens, it ain't happening. Not even leaving a question. It's a very strange stance to take, and it has proven incorrect a few times.
A, always be B, C, closing. Always be closing. Get them to sign on the line.
No, that
which
has zero
dotted.
to do with what I'm saying. No. That's a good reference, but it has nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with it at all. It's not about closing the deal. That has nothing to do with it. That's a giant duh. It has to do with the stance that, Inter Miami's not happening. Well, they just had an expansion draft. Well, they're not happening. They're not going to play games. Okay. They just hired a coach. No, they're not happening. They're not going to play games. It's not a real thing. No.
Have they played a home game yet?
Yeah, you're still doing that stupid thing, and it looks really stupid. And you did the same thing about Tom Brady after he gave an interview saying, "I'm not going back to New England." Well, he might be back in New England. He could be back in New England.
It's a negotiating ploy.
No, it's not. When you give the video that you say, "I'm not coming back," that's not negotiating, John. I don't know how you negotiate. That's saying, "I'm not coming back." That's beyond negotiating. And that was just that. At least the Miami thing drug out a while. The Tampa Bay one, it was like a few hours after you made your proclamation that he is Tampa Bay now. So anyway,
oh God.
So you're
chasing after that patent.
You're going to do this again.
Of course, it's Mike Ashley. I have to.
But no. Again, it's not black and white. You don't have to say until it happens, it ain't happening. That's your quote. That probably needs to be on a T-shirt with your face on the front. You need to understand that you could say what is actually happening right now in this. What is actually happening in this right now? Why don't you break that down instead of yelling about 8-track tapes and media play and who knows what else Mike Ashley's trying to bring back from the dead?
CompuServe?
Probably. So what is actually happening in this scenario right now so people understand Cupper's question about does Newcastle have the potential to become a top 4 club in England after this potential sale happens, if it does?
Well, let's go to the beginning here.
Yes.
Currently, there is a £300 million Saudi-led takeover of Newcastle that is close to completion. Everyone associated with the alleged sale is under a current gag order and cannot comment on it until I's are crossed, T's are dotted, everything is submitted to the Premier League for review and approved.
Okay, pause there.
Yes.
So let's understand a couple of things. A $300 million takeover is pretty complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't happen in a handshake and writing it down on a napkin, generally. There's a lot of things that go into it. 2, when there is a gag order on people who are involved in a negotiation or deal or court case or whatever, that doesn't happen on a fly-by-night basis. That is a pretty big step to take. So things are happening. Does the sale get done? No, it's not done until it's sold. But are there things that are leading you to believe this is further along than it's ever been with a Mike Ashley potential sale of Newcastle? I think that's a fair statement.
And
I don't remember gag orders before.
No, I don't either. And Mike Ashley, being the businessman that he is, somehow stands to bank a sum, and this is according to Martin Samuel, the Daily Mail, stands to bank a sum in the neighborhood of £17 million if this sale does not go through.
There's nothing too crazy about that.
Non-refundable deposit from the Saudi consortium led by Amanda Stavely.
Yeah, that had been mentioned before. I think the number was higher. when Ashley had said this, I want to say last year, maybe even longer ago than that he would be willing to negotiate with people if they put down whatever number it was that he had in mind. I think this is less than that was, but yeah, I mean, so let's take that two different ways. Mike Ashley's guaranteeing something for his time here. He's guaranteeing, some kind of return for his time in negotiating.
Shrewd business. Yeah, it's shrewd business and stuff for his time.
If you can get it, get it.
Mm-hmm.
And two, if you're going to put down $17 million and you are potentially going to pay $300, and it is a deposit, so it's part of the $300. If you're going to put down 17, it's not just a whim. Like, things have at least gotten to the point that you're willing to put some money into getting a deal done. So, again, I think it's further along than we've ever had this conversation about Newcastle being sold by Mike Ashley.
Yep. It is Amanda Stavely, her fund, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, and the Reuben brothers who are combining on this discussion that is possibly / probably leading to the sale of Newcastle United, but we've been here before.
So no, we haven't been here before. That's the part that's important. We've never been to this point before. We've never been to the point where money's been put on the table. Money's actually been put in Mike Ashley's bank account, and gag orders are on the people who are negotiating it. I think
now this part we have. Now this is further along.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. We haven't been to this point before. The problems here are obviously money coming from Saudi Arabia that would be financing this. That's troubling for a lot of people. Is it going to be troubling for Mike Ashley? Doesn't seem like it, because he's already to this point. Is it going to be troubling for the Premier League? I don't know if they can afford for it to be troubling.
Right.
I don't know if they really have a leg to stand on with other deals that are in place at other teams, other ownership groups, other people involved in the league. I don't know if they can have a problem with this on moral grounds. So I don't think any of those things are going to get in the way here. I think it's just strictly going to come down to, is the money there? And does Ashley want to sell it? And there you go. And it sounds like he's far more interested in selling it now than he ever has been.
Yeah. Deposit of 5% was agreed when the sale price was set at £340 million, but it was reduced to $300 as economic circumstances change. Once again, quoting the Daily Mail article, the deposit remains the same, meaning Ashley benefits at a higher rate if there are any last-minute hitches, but it's not expected in what will be a cash deal without debt, much like the takeover of Manchester City.
Yep. So there you go. Now let's get back to Cupper's question, because now that we've laid down the scenario for what is happening at Newcastle, get back to Cupper's question. Let's go to that now.
Sure. Cupper's question. Do you think, this is the first question.
Yep.
Do you think they'll become regular top 4 contenders?
Not overnight. I think they have the potential to, because if you've got a group willing to put down $300 million cash today for a Premier League club, you're not too afraid of the financial implications of the coronavirus stoppage of play. You're going to come out of it with money in your pocket and ready to spend. So that will help you. But their roster right now is not a top 4 roster. And that doesn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight at Manchester City. And they had Pep Guardiola to lead it. By the time he got there, it didn't happen overnight. Remember, it took him a year to build the roster he wanted and to put his style of play in. Before that, it didn't happen overnight. So it's not easy to do it straight away. I think it will take some time. The part that's hard to figure is, in this climate, with the coronavirus affecting financials, who will be affected by it in the top 4 that Newcastle could jump? I don't think Manchester City's going to be hurting. I don't think Liverpool's going to be hurting. I don't think Manchester United's going to be hurting, but they're not really in the top 4 at the moment either on the table. Leicester, I don't know. Hard to tell.
Yeah.
Chelsea? Tottenham should be okay. Chelsea's in a weird place anyway, but they should be okay. I don't think it's going to be easy for Newcastle just to, knock on the door and say, hey, guys, can I come in? I don't think it's going to be that easy for them in the top 4. I think they're going to have to make quite a few different changes. The number one's the manager. Steve Bruce is not going to be the manager of a top 4 team in the Premier League. I'm not buying it. I don't think he is at that level. So you're going to have to make that change. And then who are you going to go get? Because, top 4 managers at clubs that Newcastle is intending to become, they're not just on every, dugout around the league. They're not easy to come by. And you might think you have one, and he might have potentially grown into one, but you might not have the time to wait. Or you might get it wrong. Or he might not be the right fit. Or whatever. Lots of different things can go into it. So that will be the question. It's not going to be Steve Bruce, I don't think. And who will it be then? And that's going to really define how fast they can be that kind of club. But all the other stuff, if you have an owner who has money and is willing to spend, you have the base to build from in Newcastle with the stadium and with the potential revenues. They were the sleeping giant. They were the one that I always felt like if you got the right owner in there, that they could jump into the top 4. And I think they still have that potential. But it's potential. The managerial hire will be the number one thing they've got to get right. And how many times have we seen a owner with money get those decisions wrong? It happens. So until they get that right, no, I don't think they're a top 4 club.
No. Right now, and that's why I started the sentence the way that I did. Right now, at this very second, in this very segment, Steve Bruce is going to be given the keys and a $200 million war chest to bring folks in.
You're wasting your money.
I have a sentence to follow once we've talked about that.
Still wasting your money.
Yeah. He will be given time to prove himself as manager. There are 3 names that are linked with replacing Steve Bruce currently.
Okay.
Max Allegri.
Okay. That's a top 4 manager.
Bringing back Rafa Benitez.
I think that's a top 4 manager. Some people might disagree. I think it is.
Mauricio Pochettino.
I think he's a top 4 manager, but he's the biggest question mark. I do think he's a bigger question mark than Rafa. So, for me, from style of play, I would go Pochettino. But you're taking a bigger risk. Pochettino had success at Tottenham. You can't say that he didn't. But he doesn't have a trophy. And there's lots of different reasons. You could say he didn't have the players. You could say they were close. You could say they didn't handle the roster correctly with contracts, and they didn't spend that year, and all kinds of stuff. There's plenty of reasons that are valid. But the fact is, Pochettino has not won a trophy. Allegri has won a trophy. Rafa has won a trophy. Pochettino hasn't. I would love to see Pochettino in a situation like this if he is given the resources, the money to spend, and he's able to go get the players that he wants. I'd love to see it. And that's the way I would go.
Yeah.
But I would know that it's a bigger risk.
According to our friends at Sky, those involved in the takeover have not approached a potential new manager and feel Bruce should be given at least until the end of the season to stake his claim.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Look, we're a little bit smarter than maybe the average bear, or at least we hope we are. Let's be real about this. You're not going to win anything by coming in and saying, yeah, Steve Bruce can get fired the day we take over. Like, you're not going to say that.
No.
There's no point in going in and bringing in a new manager right now. There's no point to it. So you're not going to say anything like that. Of course, you're going to say all the right things about, we're going to give time and et cetera, and there'll be money to spend. And what happens is when the season finishes, whenever that's going to be, and you start to look down the road and you start to talk preliminarily to agents about players before you get into actual offers, I would assume that many agents are going to say, my client's not coming to a club that is trying to get to the top 4 that is being managed by Steve Bruce. The track record's not there. Now, if you go get Allegri, if you go get Rafa, and I wonder where Rafa's standing is in this kind of conversation. I think it should still be good, but I feel like at times he's been damaged in the media, which is unfair. I mean, the guy's been successful. But I wonder what agents will tell them about, let's just say those 3 or anybody else who could be on the market, that, my client's not interested in playing for Steve Bruce, but he would be interested in playing for Pochettino, or he would be interested in playing for Allegri. That's what's going to drive it. That's what always drives it. So you're not going to come out now and say, yeah, Steve Bruce, first thing we do when we walk in the door, he's fired. You're not going to pull that.
No.
So that's just playing the game. We know how this stuff goes.
We know that Rafa Benitez is adored and beloved by the fans at Newcastle for what he's been able to do with them, keeping them in the Premier League, and even when they were relegated, staying with the team in the Championship to get them back to the Premier League. So, when it comes to Rafa, for me, I would love to see what Rafa could do with a different level of investment, because the fans, and I'm sure that Carl Segi, once he listens to the show, can give us the background on the notion that Ashley didn't give Benitez the backing, both emotional and financial, that he deserved, and he lost him. And so Rafa was out, and, so I think that if you bring Rafa back, I think that there's an opportunity there. I think you bring in Allegri. I think that there's a shot there to be top 6. And I'm saying top 6 for all these guys. I don't think top 4 yet because of who's in front of them. And
let's not quibble over 2 spots. It really doesn't make a difference.
So, but I think that they can be far better.
Actually, you know what? Let's also be real about the situation in the Premier League. You're trying to get into the top 6. The old top 4 doesn't exist anymore. It's the top 2 and then the next 4. That's what it is. Manchester City and Liverpool are so much further ahead of everybody in terms of quality that it's not a top 4 anymore. It's a top 6. It's a top 6, and it's a really top 2 and a next 4. Yeah. That's what it is. Let's not lie about this anymore.
So no, I think it is. I think that it is that top 4, and you're top 2, and you're trying to get into that next 4.
You're trying to get into the top 6. I'm with that. The top 4 nomenclature just doesn't even exist anymore. So throw that to the side. You're trying to become a top club. Period. Let's not worry about numbers. Newcastle's not a top club right now. They're trying to become a top club. I think they can get there. I think any of these managers can get them there. I don't think Steve Bruce can.
No. And, Steve Bruce has been that guy who can, middle of the road, keep you afloat kind of a thing, be in the Championship. He's kind of there, he's not going to give you that top 6. He'll keep you there in the room, but he's not going to get you to the front of the line.
Well, let's also be real about something else. There's very few managers who do. You can have a great manager, but if he doesn't have the players to get him there, he's not going to be successful. You can have a great set of players, and if you don't have a manager of a certain level, you're not going to be successful. But if you have to pick which one is more impactful on your final league placement, it's the players. You can only go so far if you don't have the players. That's just true. And a bad manager can hold a group back. I think that's definitely the case, but at some point, talent wins out. And right now, the most important thing is Newcastle does not have a team that is at that level. They can't compete with a Liverpool. They can't compete with a Manchester City, no matter what manager you have in there, because Manchester City and Liverpool have the combination of both. They have the incredibly talented roster, and they have one of the best managers in the world. Both of them can say that. So they've got both. That's why they're elite. Nobody else has the roster that they do, and nobody else has the manager that is demonstrably better than Pep or Klopp. Those things are I think, accurate. So if you're Newcastle, you first got to get the roster the way you need. Because how many times, let's think about it this way. How many times have you seen, in general, a less talented roster win the league?
Leicester.
So one?
One.
And this is what everybody does, and it's the same thing when it comes to pro rel or whatever other conversation you want to have. But Leicester. One. How many times have you seen a maybe less than top manager take a team that has the talent to win? Lots. We've seen that happen many times. You've seen how many questions about managers over the years, about different managers and what they did, and they still lifted the trophy at the end because they had the players to do it. I mean, for example, let's take Real Madrid with 3 straight Champions Leagues. People questioned Zinedine Zidane's tactics the whole way. They said he didn't have tactics, but he had the most talented roster you could find. So they kind of won games. That will happen. So until Newcastle has the players, it's not going to happen. But how often, going back to that conversation with the agents, how often do you see the players say, well, I'm not going to go there because I don't want my client to play for that manager? So they do go hand in hand to a degree, and that's going to be the curious thing here. I don't think Steve Bruce lasts. You know, if Newcastle, if the ownership comes in and wants to slow roll it a bit, does he go into the next season? Possibly. I think this situation we're in now, with the next season not starting until who knows when, you still got games to finish in the current season, probably will make that not happen. I think Bruce will finish out the current season, and that would be it. You'd start fresh with somebody else. If you decide that one of those 3 or whoever else you hire is the guy. If you don't have a clear-cut decision, then, you might wait. You might have somebody in mind that might be in a job right now. And you might say, you know what, we're going to wait. We're going to wait, and we'll just keep rolling as it is, and we'll start to build in other ways, and we'll start to build as we can. But we know that we're not going to be able to get where we want to go with what we have currently. It's going to be down to who they want as the manager. If it's one of these 3, I think it starts the next season.
We'll wait on Newcastle and see what the news is there. Top of the hour, and we've been talking about this over the last week and a half. The conference call, the video call, whatever you want to call it, apparently is now going to be adding League One teams in addition to League Two teams, trying to determine their future, if they're going to call their season right now or whatever timeline they're looking at.
And you're talking about England, correct?
England, yes, we're still in England. The England League Two video call now apparently is going to include League One franchises, and that is supposed to start at the top of the hour.
Okay, we will see where that goes. All right. Before we jump into this North American Super League discussion, which could get interesting, do we have anything else on the table from Europe first?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and finish. We'll finish off everything but the North American Super League.
Right. Let's go to La Liga.
Okay.
And it is a combination of things involving Barca and Real and their stadia from our friends at The Sun and the Daily Mail. Barcelona, and this is from Ian Tuckey at The Sun, Barcelona could shut Nou Camp until next February, with the current season remaining unfinished. If Spanish football's doomsday scenario over the coronavirus pandemic comes true, La Liga president Javier Tebas believes the Spanish game would lose £882 million, no more matches, and a transfer window delayed from August until the next campaign starts September 15th. And he also says that Barcelona is reportedly preparing to play without fans for 10 months, although the more optimistic possibility is supporters packing Nou Camp by November. La Vanguardia says they have a leaked report into Barca's doomsday planning with two alternative outcomes. In the more negative case, Barca takes a huge financial hit, and if the Nou Camp is shut out to spectators until February, the more positive scenario sees La Liga resuming June 15th, finishing in mid-August. But even if that happens, Barca is not said to be expecting fans to be allowed until November. So the doomsday scenario, if they don't get into Nou Camp for 10 months, close to £900 million of losses from Barcelona.
Well, let's parse through it a little bit to make some sense of it, because this is a really complicated situation across the board, but the way some of it's being reported complicates it even more. So here you've got two possible scenarios, in which there's not just two. I mean, let's make it clear that if you don't start June 15th, I think that was the idea, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
If you don't start June 15th, it doesn't mean that you can't start until February. June and February are a long way away. If you don't start June, you could start July. You could start August. You could start September. You could start October. You could do lots of different things. So it's not one or the other. They're not planning on starting before June 15th. And I don't think they will have fans anytime soon. Could they potentially be saying that they're not going to have fans until February? Maybe. And it might just be a little complicated in the way it's being discussed here. But let's... the transfer window part of it. It's not exactly clear in how they reference this, and let's try to bring a little clarity to it. So the transfer window right now, the way UEFA wants to do it, and this is the logical way, they're not going to have the transfer window open until leagues have completed their current season. The problem is you've got leagues like Belgium, who've already said they're done, Scotland, who is heading in the direction that they're done. You're hearing other leagues saying that they might go down that road, mostly smaller leagues. And then you've got a situation like Germany where they might start back in 2.5 weeks. And England, who might not start back until more like this date, like the middle of June. Italy, we don't really know yet. So it's going to be hard to have a coherent transfer window. If you were Barcelona, you were looking at this transfer window in a very big way, because you have one player that you were expecting to sell for a large amount of money, Coutinho. I don't know, one, if you're going to sell him, and I don't know if you're going to sell him for a large amount of money now. So that's what's hard when you start saying these numbers and you start saying, well, they're going to lose this much money or they've lost this much money. Some of that is on speculation around what transfer sales would do. And that part is completely unknown. But teams are going to take a hit on attendance and game day revenue because there's not going to be any in the traditional sense. Could there be, alternative ways to have match day revenue with no people in the stands? Could be. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know if you're going to do things virtually. I don't know how you're going to figure that out. But you're going to have to try because you're going to want to offset some of that. So to a degree, this is planning, and I think when you hear doomsday scenario, it obviously gets your attention. And I hate that that's kind of how some of this gets covered, because it's not exactly fair. Look, everybody's going to lose money. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Getafe, Real Sociedad, everybody. Valladolid, everybody. How much they're going to lose is we don't know yet. Teams that have more match day revenue are going to lose more. That's legit. Also, teams that were looking at this transfer window, a year ago and saying, okay, we're planning on selling here, we're planning on selling here. It's plans, but you start to factor those in your budgeting and your planning. And that might not happen now. And you don't know when it's going to happen. So it is a scary proposition for clubs that were looking to make money in the transfer market this season, because they might not be able to make what they thought they could, and that will have a huge effect. But the loss that you can actually quantify easily is going to be match day revenue. And if you know what a club typically makes on average on a match day, it's just doing math about how much they're going to lose.
And according also to the Daily Mail, along those lines with La Liga, you could have the possibility of Barca and Real Madrid finishing their seasons in their B-team stadia. Barca is considering playing their remaining fixtures at the 6,000 capacity Johan Cruyff Stadium, and the other and Real looking at playing at Alfredo Di Stefano. Both clubs feeling that the psychological effect on players of playing without fans could be limited by playing in smaller arenas.
Yeah, the psychological effect, it sucks, but it's going to be reality. I think that's pretty well understood at this point. And there's also no point in playing in a large venue if you don't have people in there. For some, they don't have a choice. That's the only place they have that they could broadcast it from, because that's what's going to drive it. And this has to be understood. You are going to play these games whenever you can. And I've said, I think from a business perspective, it makes sense to finish the current season before worrying about the next one. But you're going to play these games for money. For TV money, specifically. But for money. It's business. Are there things that are good about having, live sports back? Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a big morale boost to the general population. Give people something to rally behind. You're going to have to figure the things out. And I think it's been slightly overplayed in, you can't have games because fans are going to gather and watch them. Well, you've got to put things in place to not allow that to happen. And the clubs have to be very, I think, vigilant on that. Also, local government's going to have to support it, which does complicate when you come back. I do think it's a different environment in general than it was when they tried to do behind closed doors at the beginning of this, because I don't think people necessarily had an understanding of what this was. None of us have ever seen it before, so it's understandable. But the scenes in Paris of their supporters outside the stadium having a party while it's a match behind closed doors, you don't want to repeat that. I don't think you will repeat that. But I've even heard people to the point say, you can't play games because then people are going to gather in homes and watch it together. Well, at some point, people have to make their own decisions. And, so you're going to allow a club, if you're a league and you've got the Bundesliga and you've got teams that are going to end up insolvent in a month, but you've got a route to playing games and fulfilling your TV contract and keeping clubs alive, you're going to have them go bankrupt because fans might get together and watch it at home. And that's the club's responsibility. At some point, it goes a little bit too far. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, look, you're going to get these games played because of TV. That's going to be the number one element. And you're going to play in a venue that works for TV. There's no fans there. You're not worried about the size of the venue. If you can broadcast from there, you're going to play from there. We've talked about it from Atlanta United's perspective. Could you play at the training ground? You could. You're going to have to bring in equipment to effectively broadcast it, like we saw with the homegrown game in 2018. But it can be done. What's going to be more cost-effective? Doing that or playing at Mercedes-Benz or playing at Kennesaw? Don't know. I don't know the breakdown of that. It's a different kind of conversation because you're not renting the venue to sell tickets. You'd be renting the venue for a TV product. There's lots of questions about it. So those things will get figured out. But yeah, if you're playing behind closed doors and you've got these 6,000 or 8,000 seat venues that are your B team that plays in the second or third division in Spain, depending on where they are, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer.
Both clubs would need to install VAR facilities in their stadia before the first game back. Barca could have more difficulty than Real Madrid if they decide to move, because UEFA have to sanction any change of stadium midway through the season.
This is the stuff that, yes, in a normal sense, yes, UEFA is going to have to sanction. They've changed their venue. I'd like to think that UEFA is going to be able to process those changes very quickly in light of the current situations. I think that it'll be okay. If that's what we're really worried about, then UEFA needs to get their stuff together and be ready to handle it, because it's a piece of paper. Really. Couple
of other things before we get into Super League staying overseas. UEFA have apparently drawn up a plan to finish Champions League 17 matches in 23 days in August, is a plan that they have currently put out there.
I mean, it sounds great, but until we know when leagues are going to play and be able to finish, there's just no way to know. I think what you can take out of it, the date doesn't really matter because that part we don't know, but the idea that they want to do it all in a batch is an interesting idea. That's different than how, obviously, the Champions League is normally played. So would that be possible if everybody's finished by then? And we don't know if that's going to happen. So maybe. I'm intrigued to see how they do it, but I don't know if those dates are going to hold firm.
Okay, so let's take the calendar away from it for a moment, and let's look at the plan in and of itself.
Okay.
They would have, let's just call it day one. Day one, Manchester City completes their tie with Real Madrid. Day two, Chelsea plays Bayern Munich. So that would be day one and day two. Then you're looking at quarterfinals on what would be day 5 and day 6. Then a couple days later, you'd have your semifinals, and then beginning to end, 22 days between resumption of the schedule and the final in and of itself. So they're looking at a 3-week period.
Okay. If it works, that's one way to do it. So I would assume that they would want to do that after everybody finishes their seasons. So if you start to try to figure things out here, then you want to finish the seasons. You want to finish the Champions League. I would assume the Europa League would be included in this.
Yeah.
You'd finish your European competitions, and then you would have a transfer window, and then you would try to have everybody started around the same time.
Yeah. If you insert it back into the calendar, they're looking at doing it in August, and that would create a logjam with the Premier League unless the Premier League has to slide and things like that. So if the Premier League was...
Hold on. How would it create a logjam with the Premier League?
Well, just depending on when the Premier League goes. But if the Premier League ends...
John. We've got to be clear in this stuff because it's very confusing. So they would create a logjam with the Premier League. Why? That would be if the Premier League schedule starts on time for next season, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that, I think, is very unlikely. Because right now, the Premier League isn't even set to think about playing games until mid-June.
Right.
And they've got 9 rounds to play, correct?
Correct.
So this is the stuff that I think, and it's something we try really hard because it's really confusing for us too. But I know it's confusing for you guys who aren't as in depth into it and trying to make as much sense of it. Like that, the August thing with the Premier League has nothing to do with this anymore, because if they start mid-June, and I think they've had an idea in the Premier League to ramp it up quickly and play games quickly, to start in mid-June and somehow be finished by the end of July.
Yeah,
you have 9 rounds to play, and you want to try to do it in 5 to 6 weeks, essentially.
Yeah. Yes.
But okay, you finish in July. You're going to have at least a month between seasons and a transfer window. So, like, if UEFA, And this is, again, you have to start thinking logistics. If UEFA is saying, okay, we're going to start the Champions League back in August, well, then the current season isn't going to be done by August, because the Champions League would be the end of the current season. And then you'd go into your transfer windows. Like, it doesn't, like, the whole August thing, a logjam, like, there's no way the Premier League's starting on time for next season. There's no way.
Right.
That's impossible. So that's why, I mean, I think it's easy with so much going on to get this stuff confused at times, but there's no way that comes into play.
Yeah, UEFA.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I know. UEFA throws out an August proposal when you don't know if you're going to get there yet, and that's why I wanted to pull it out of the
No, that part's fine. The August proposal's fine. I don't have a problem with that. That's not the issue. It's who reported this? Where are you getting this from?
Daily Mail.
Okay.
Has
the Daily Mail, including the part about, well, they're going to run into a logjam if they don't do it all at once in August because of the Premier League. The Premier League's not starting on time. The Daily Mail's got to understand that. And they've got to make that clear to people that if you start the season in mid-June and you play 9 rounds and you have FA Cup semis and a final, you're not finishing by the beginning of July to give you the time to have a transfer window and an off season and start the next season on time. It ain't happening.
Yeah,
you can give that up now.
Yeah, and that's the flaw in the Daily Mail's presentation, because their assumption is Premier League ends June.
And the Premier League is not going to trump UEFA and the Champions League with all this either. From a timeline perspective, you're going to follow Champions League because that is the conclusion to the season. So, the Daily Mail.
Optimistic.
No, it's not. It's stupid. It's beyond optimistic. It's stupid and it's misleading.
Yeah. So that's what the Daily Mail had, and so that'll go away for this morning. And then Serie A officials have voted unanimously to play out the 2019-20 season. That came this morning in a video call. All 20 clubs voted unanimously to go ahead with playing out this season's remaining Serie A fixtures. A statement released on the website this afternoon from the league clarified that the resumption of play would be in line with FIFA and UEFA regulations. It would fall under the Italian government's Phase 2 plan in reopening the country, currently under lockdown from the 4th of May. Brescia and Torino, who had previously expressed their refusal to return to play, were among those who voted in favor. Representatives reiterated their intention to finish the 2019-2020 campaign as long as staff and players are protected and medical protocol is respected.
It's down to dollars and cents. You've got a TV contract you've got to fulfill. That's where you're at. You've got to fulfill the TV contract. You've got to get these games played. It does you no good to call the season and not finish it to try to start the next season on time. You're creating more problems by doing that. So it's what makes sense. And look, we don't know the dates. We don't know what that's going to look like now. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all because it's just what makes good business sense.
Nathan Pugh would like more background on a Super League. And he says, if you think people lose their minds with no pro rel in MLS, think of how more apoplectic folks will be when a consortium of teams break off, and this is answerable to no one. Also, up the Reds, that is all, John. Hashtag 2017 free burrito match.
Okay. We've got to work on your transitions because...
Brought to you by...
No. Yeah, okay, go ahead and do that before we figure out how to better transition into this. Who is our favorite lawyer in the city of Decatur?
AA-legal.com, Stephen Apolinsky and Associates, LLC. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in verdicts that have gone in their client's favor. You can get a free consultation. They have live chat available at right this very moment. So you can log on and catch up with a representative from Stephen Apolinsky and Associates. You can also send an email to Steve at steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Give them a call at 404-377-9191. You can get your free consultation in a bunch of different ways. There's a live person available, live chat, secure, free, and easy start whenever you would like to. Wrongful death and personal injury lawyers. Stephen Apolinsky has been recognized as one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Okay.
I can keep going if you want.
No, we are good. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for your support of Soccer Down here. Thank you to all of our sponsors and supporters over the years, partners. Thanks to Scott Flood and the Flood Project. Mm-hmm. Thanks to our friends at Wild Heaven and Reformation Breweries, where we've done some events. Burnt Hickory, where we will be doing an event when we are able to do so. Tomorrow, we will have an interview with Nofo Brewing, a new one that we will be doing events at when we are able to do so. So lots of friends of the network, and when MLS resumes, we will get back into our MLS Fantasy League presented by the Jason Wright Agency. Jason Wright Agency on Facebook, Jason Wright AGEN on Twitter. All your insurance needs, Jason Wright can help you out. So check in with him if you have insurance needs at the moment. Business, car, personal, whatever. He will take care of you. Okay. Now, you just ramrodded a transition in before we thanked our sponsors, and I'm going to try to do a better job of that.
Would you like for me to restate Nathan's question?
No. I'm going to do this in a professional way, John. So, Dutch striker Vincent Janssen came out and said that Liga MX is better than the Eredivisie. This got people riled up. Got a lot of people riled up because how can you say such a thing? He believes Liga MX is better than the Eredivisie. He made the move from Spurs to Monterrey in July of 2019, won the Apertura in the wild way that Monterrey did. Now, it hasn't been so good so far in the current season, but he said, the Mexican league is very good and the standard is high. It is better than the Eredivisie. That's my opinion. Here, there are a lot of international players that come from this part of the world, and there are 2 that come from Europe, of which I am one. It is a completely different way of playing football, and it certainly isn't bad in terms of quality. If you look at our team, you'll see national team players from Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina. He went on to talk about the type of soccer. He said, and then about his time at Tottenham as well. He said, it was not the period I was hoping for at Tottenham. As a 22-year-old boy from AZ, it was a great step, but I didn't get the minutes that I expected. Also, I did not reach my potential. Ultimately, you want to play again, be a footballer, and be appreciated. What he appreciates about Liga MX is that there's more space to operate in, but it's also there's more physical players. So he's come out and said Liga MX is better than the Dutch league. We've talked about MLS and kind of where it wants to get to, and the Dutch league is one that we've talked about, Belgium, and eventually France. So Vincent Janssen, who's played in the Eredivisie, who's playing in Liga MX, might be a little biased right now because of who's signing his checks. He's saying that Liga MX is at that level. We've talked about MLS and Liga MX quite a bit. Are they at the same level? In some ways, yes, but in the most important ways on the field, no, because Liga MX has won the Champions League every time, pretty much. You had Saprissa win one a long while ago. You've had some close calls, but it's been Liga MX winning on the field. So MLS has to catch up to that. But you have this now, so this leads us into the conversation about a proposed North American Super League, because that started to make the rounds a bit. Henry Bushnell wrote at Yahoo Sports about this and talked about why it could happen. There's some things in the article that I really agree with, and there's some things that feel like a reach to me. But let's talk the level real quick, because that's going to be one thing that's going to drive it. MLS wants to be at that kind of level. Are they right now? No, but they're close. But they're not. Financially, business perspective, are they at that level? You could say yes, and you could even say that they're ahead of a lot of other leagues around the world because it's very stable. The quality of the facilities is very high. Like across the board, it's a good league to play in, and that's why many more players are coming to it. It's, in a lot of ways, Liga MX looks at MLS and says, man, I want to be there. And Alejandro Iragorri, who we mentioned some of his quotes about MLS, it's important to bring this in because you compare MLS to Liga MX. On the field, Mexico has the advantage. Off the field, Iragorri says MLS has been growing in an orderly, slow, but constant way in all senses. Commercially, infrastructure, financial structure, reach, and sports. Its fundamentals are solid. Its market is very large, relevant in purchasing power, and growing in taste and appetite for soccer. Today, MLS clubs have a much higher annual turnover than our league. That's the important part. I'm kind of blown away. Like yesterday, and this, I'm not picking on the quote you pulled, John, because this is what was spread everywhere. It was all about the whole thing about the short term, the medium term, and then the long term, everybody would benefit. There was a little bit about the MLS has been growing in an orderly, slow, and constant way in all senses. That last line is the freaking kicker. Like, how is this not being talked about more in the United States? Today, MLS clubs have a much higher annual turnover than our league. Talking about Liga MX. That's kind of an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody has been talking about this Super League thing as, oh, MLS wants it, MLS wants it, MLS has got to have it, MLS is craving all this stuff. Liga MX needs the money. They need more stability. They need more money. They can't even do promotion relegation right now because there's nobody in the second division that is ready to come up, that meets the requirements of a top-flight team. Leones Negros is probably the closest. And they're playing at a stadium that Chivas left. You know, I mean, that's the reality. So the whole thing, again, it goes back to a lot of what we talked about yesterday, like this idea that MLS is awful and bad for the sport, and it's nowhere, and it's never going to be one of the best. And some of that comes out in this article that I vehemently disagree with. That, right there, one thing that MLS should be praised for, among many, but one thing, is the fact that from a business perspective, from an annual turnover number, it's better than the league to their south. The quality on the field has to match that. It's not there yet. You've got to win these games. But right now, MLS is in a healthier business situation than Liga MX on the whole. One reason why is the single entity model. You've got Atlanta United, economic power. You've got others that are in that situation as well. Could they do more if you didn't have the single entity model, if you didn't have, the idea of a salary cap, if you didn't have that kind of stuff? Would Atlanta spend more? Probably. Would others? Some would. Would you hurt the bottom line of the league as a whole? Potentially. And that's the part we don't know. That's the part where you're playing in hypotheticals. But because of the league structure, you are at a position where your annual turnover is better than Liga MX. So if that continues, what happens? Where are players going to go? Where are the best managers going to go? Where do they go in general? Who's going to pay them more? Who's going to be able to pay them more? MLS. What did you see this offseason? How many players did you see choose to come from Liga MX to MLS? What was the response from Mexican media? Very defensive. Well, we beat them on the field, which they do. But Alan Pulido, Pizarro, Zelarayan, Cavallini, keep going. They didn't come here because they like TGI Fridays. They came here because it's a better league. Believe it or not, there are people who think, people who work in the game and people who play in the game and people who, make a living in the game, that actually believe that MLS is a better place to be than Liga MX. I know it's crazy, because if you heard some people who work in the game and talk in the game in the United States, you'd think that MLS is the worst place to be. Well, it's not. To the point that Liga MX would consider creating a North American Super League with MLS. They have a partnership, would have had, and it's still on the cards right now. I do think it's going to have to get pushed back to next year, but to the point that you were going to have an all-star game between the two. Liga MX has never done an all-star game. Liga MX owners have talked about it, front office people have talked about it. They learn from MLS teams where they've met in CONCACAF Champions League, where they've met in Campeones Cup, Leagues Cup last year. The announcement of the All-Star game. Liga MX people talked about how, wow, we've never thought about presenting ourselves in this way. This is very big. This is very professional. This is, trying to do things on a different level. We don't think that way. They would benefit from this. That's why they are interested. MLS, yes, they want the TV ratings that Liga MX gets. They want some of the dollars that Liga MX gets in this country, of course. And they're also chasing credibility, because right now, Liga MX is seen as the better league. I don't think it's that big of a gap. You have to get over the hump and win games, but I don't think the gap is that big, especially not this year. Especially not now, after you see the exodus, because it kind of felt that way this season. So much big talent coming from Mexico to the United States. Now, people will point, well, Atlanta lost to Club America 3-0. And you're not taking a game-by-game situation of this. You have to look at the trend. The trend is not good. That game doesn't tell you anything in and of itself, because if you want to look at no Joseph Martinez, no Miles Robinson, no Franco Escobar, you're missing a lot in that game. No George Bello. You're missing 3 of your 4 on the back line. That obviously had an effect. Over time, MLS has to be better in Champions League. Now, in Henry Bushnell's article, he talks about how it could look. It's a very interesting thing, because it's never happened in soccer. Because U.S. and Canada with Canadian teams and MLS, it's not the same thing. This would be 2 leagues coming together to form a Super League. The Super League idea has been talked about in Europe for, 20 years or so?
Yeah, sounds about right.
It's been talked about with Juventus and Real Madrid have been 2 clubs that have really pushed for this hard. You had the whole soccer leaks thing, where you had communications from clubs talking about what a Super League would look like in Europe. Now, you've had a lot of pushback in Europe, because what would that do to the domestic competitions? Which is a very important question. This is different in some ways. One, we don't know what would actually be on the table. We don't know what it would look like. Bushnell has a proposal here that I don't know if it really makes sense. And I think some of his arguments for it making sense don't make sense. We'll get into that in a second. I think this originally was talked about as a merger between the 2 leagues, not a Super League. I would think that a merger between the 2 leagues would make far more sense than creating a Super League on top of the 2. Because I don't know what the benefit would truly be to do it that way. Now, you can get some of the things that Bushnell's talking about if you merge them, as opposed to just having a Super League on top. I think a merger makes more sense. And that's a harder thing to do, because then Liga MX and MLS are not operating on their own. They are the same business. Does MLS want to give things up to bring Mexico into the fold? Does Mexico want to give up its tradition to bring MLS into the fold? Those are the things that make it a difficult thing. We'll go back to Irigoyen's point here, the one that got all the headlines. It's probable that a possible creation of a North American league, and notice he did not say Super League, he said league. It's probable that a possible creation of a North American league in the short term would be better for MLS, in the medium term for Liga MX, but in the long term, it's better for both. He said the potential was immense. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree, but the Tom Marshall article has the word super in the quote.
Okay, well, that's interesting because the Bushnell article does not. So, again, details. Details are very important, people. Very, very important. Okay. Well, let's talk about the Bushnell proposal for what the Super League would look like.
All right.
And then we'll talk about the Marshall article. So, the ideas of it, and this is the case that Henry Bushnell makes for why it makes sense. A closed league with the reach of Mexico City to Seattle, Toronto to LA, New York to Tijuana. He said it could be lucrative. Yep. Then there's a whole thing about billionaires exploiting labor and stop. The players would be well paid for this. And the closed league idea, again, it gets to when you hear closed league, I think you can assume what the agenda is behind that because it's become a loaded word. Yes, Mexico is suspending promotion relegation right now because they don't have clubs in the second division that are strong enough. Their second division is shrunk to 12 teams. They have to build the second division back up before promotion relegation is a relevant thing. That's been the same issue in the United States. You've never had a first and second division that are strong enough for promotion relegation. You've never had it. Now, are you closer than you've ever been? Yeah. The USL Championship is the strongest second division league the United States has ever had. I don't think there's any question about that. But would Indy 11, Louisville City, Phoenix Rising, and I know Phoenix Rising is trying to get an MLS expansion team, but as they are currently constructed, would they be able to handle going up? Maybe. Would the Colorado Springs Switchbacks? Would the Las Vegas Lights? Would the Charleston Battery? Then you start getting into a different conversation. That's the issue. It's the same issue that Mexico's facing right now. You have a big gap. So the closed league thing, put that to the side. That's creating drama on the pro-rel front. That has nothing to do with this conversation. Creating a merger between the two or a super league or whatever. Could you have pro-rel within it? Sure. But the pro-rel conversation of a closed league, and closed leagues are bad and billionaires make more money. Like, every league, every billionaire that is running a team is trying to make money. There's no business in soccer business, that's the important word here. I'm not talking about a nonprofit agency. I'm not talking about a charity in the game. I'm talking about a professional club. And you can put your youth clubs into this too if you want to. None of them are trying to lose money. Last time I checked, they're all trying to make money. Are they trying to win a championship too? Yeah. But are they trying to make money? Yeah. Is that bad? I don't think so. No. I don't think it is. I mean, was Bolton trying to make money? Yeah.
They were spending far more to try to make money.
No. But hold on. Let's make this very clear. They weren't spending more money than they were bringing in out of the goodness of their hearts.
No.
What were they trying to do?
They were trying to get themselves promoted one league, if not two.
And why?
So they can get the large dollars associated with the Premier League that they were once a part of.
Yep. And that's the same for any second division team. That's the same for any third division team. That's the same for any team. Everybody's trying to make money because you have to make money to keep the doors open. It's just a fact. So let's leave the making money for a soccer team is a bad thing out of it. All right. This is from Bushnell's article. What has held MLS back for decades is a combination of risk aversion and a meager TV deal. Meager TV deal, 100%. and you've only in the last one started to make any reasonable amount of money. That's an absolute fact. You need to make more money on your TV because, again, you're trying to make more money. So TV is one area that you're not making very much compared to other leagues. That needs to change. Risk aversion. That is, again, I think a loaded term. Is MLS scared to spend a bunch of money? Well, if your goal is to make money, you're going to be risk averse. Unless you're going to go the Bolton road and then end up nearly going bankrupt, which you don't really want to do. Okay, so MLS has wanted to bring in revenue first before they become more willing to take risks. Is that taking risks? Is wanting to make more money before spending more money being risk averse? It's not for me.
I don't see it.
It's not for me. Like, if I'm looking at, man, I'd really like to risk buying a brand new car, but I'm not making enough money to do that. But man, I would really like to have a new car because then people would think I'm really cool. But I don't have the money to do that. You know what I mean? Like, there comes down to some dollars and cents that are just flat out there.
Yes.
Are MLS owners, stashing a whole bunch of money right now and just, rolling around in it like Scrooge McDuck? No.
Yeah, Cartman, no.
No. Eric Cartman is not rolling around the money like, sweet guys, this is awesome. No, that doesn't happen. They're trying to make more money to spend more money. That's a fact, people. Like, you have to understand that. Tell me, in the history of the United States soccer, one team that made boatloads of money for their owner to roll around and say, sweet guys, this is awesome. There isn't one. The answer would be zero. Never. In the history of professional soccer in the United States, has any club made that kind of money to say, yeah, I'm going to be risk averse?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no.
The Cosmos, people will say the Cosmos. The Cosmos were blowing money like crazy because Warner Communications was their owner. Warner Communications had lots of business, music, movies, TV, Atari video games. And what were the Cosmos? A tool to promote those, especially worldwide.
They were part of the balance sheet at Warner Communications.
They were Bugs Bunny. That's why Bugs Bunny hung out on the sidelines a lot of times. That's what they were used for. And people from Warner said, and this is at the heyday of the Cosmos phenomenon, was our most visible representation of Warner Communications internationally is the New York Cosmos. It was a loss leader. That's what it was. Because you could take the Cosmos on tour to Japan, and then you could also bring whatever band you're promoting, whatever movie you're promoting, whatever video game you're promoting, whatever, and do business with it. So it was a loss leader. It wasn't making a ton of money, even with the big crowds, even with all that, because they were spending wild amounts on salary. You could say they were being risky, but they were also in a situation where they were not the Washington Diplomats. They were not the Tampa Bay Rowdies. They were a loss leader for their owner.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the case for everybody else. MLS, we talked about it. They almost went out of business in 2001. They have steadily grown since then. They're at a point now where their annual turnover is better than Liga MX, but is it immense to where Cartman's rolling around in the money? No, it's not. So they are trying to bring in more money to spend more money. That's a fact. That's okay. Now the question, which I don't know who said this first, but it's a very famous saying, you've got to spend money to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Are you at that point where you can say, we are stable enough, we're in the position we want to be, we still want to bring in more money, but we're not going to get over the hump unless we spend more? That's a valid question. And that's a very important question for MLS to ask itself right now. I don't have the answer because I don't have the books. The only people who have the answer are the owners of the teams, because they see what's coming in and what's going out. They know what it is. We don't. We're guessing. They're better than they've ever been. And according to Liga MX owners, they're better than them. But are they in a position to where now they could say, blow the salary cap up, like Wayne Rooney said, add 2 more designated players, et cetera, et cetera? I'm going to assume they're not there yet, or at least they're not comfortable with being there yet because of some of the things that were said during the CBA negotiation, with the whole thing about the third designated player and elements of that. Are they ready to just spend whatever they want? No. Are they ready to spend more? Yeah. And are they going to get to a point where they say, you know what, we're going to spend to make more. We're going to spend more to make more. Maybe. And I think it's closer than it's ever been, but I don't know if they're there yet. I'm going to assume no, because of some of the things that were said. Now, Bushnell also makes an assumption that I'm not 100% sure of. I'm going to read the paragraph. And a North American Super League would bring in loads of it. This is likely the short term Iragori mentioned. Liga MX clubs draw huge TV audiences both stateside and back home. Their games draw roughly twice as many viewers as MLS games in the U.S. That's fact. A marriage of that long-standing appetite for soccer to MLS's stability, corporate attractiveness, and marketing might is what appeals to suits at both Liga MX and MLS HQ. Used a lot of words that are kind of loaded there to describe MLS, but anyway, we'll leave that to the side for a second. Would a North American Super League bring in loads of money? I don't know. Would it lose money? No, I don't think so. The TV deal would be big because the ratings are great for Liga MX, and Liga MX would be part of this in terms of, you know, the teams that are driving that. You need to be a little bit clear about it. The Morelia Toluca game is not drawing those ratings.
No.
Just like the Colorado
Vancouver
San Jose game, or Vancouver, whoever. That's not driving the MLS ratings. Who drives the ratings? In MLS, it's Atlanta. It's Seattle. It's
LA.
I'd have to look at. I think. Well, now the LA Galaxy would, obviously, because of Chicharito. Zlatan did to a degree. I think Chicharito will even more. I think LAFC does because of Vela and because of their quality. The New York teams have not driven ratings, and that's a problem. That's something that needs to change for MLS to reach its full potential. Chicago is not drawing the ratings that they should, and that's another thing that needs to change because those are big markets. In Liga MX, what teams drive those ratings? Club America, Monterrey, Tigres, Chivas. And to a lesser extent, I believe, I need to double check and see if my gut's right here. Pumas, Cruz Azul, to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
But Chivas, America, Monterrey, Tigres are the 4 that drive it. In MLS, it's Atlanta, Galaxy, LAFC, probably Seattle as the 4 that drive the TV ratings. We'll see about Miami. We'll see if the New York teams change the paradigm. We'll see if Chicago changes the paradigm. So those 8 would. But, and that's what you're going to pay for. That's what you're going to sell to the TV people. That's understandable. That's what you're going to sell. But you're also going to have to account for Colorado and Tijuana and Morelia and Vancouver, and you're going to have to account for that. So the Liga MX games, on average, draw twice as many viewers as MLS games here. Okay? Are you going to get twice as much money? Okay, you could. That's reasonable. Now, I think one thing to factor in is, are you going to get twice as much money as you expected to get on your own? because the next TV deal for MLS will be better than the current one. I think. Now, this whole pandemic is probably not helping with that, but is it going to be bigger? Yeah, I think that's reasonable. $90 million a year is what you're getting right now. Could the next MLS deal get you 150? That feels like a reasonable speculation. Could it get to 200? Maybe. Some of that's going to depend on the market, like what other rights are out there, and I don't know the true full landscape of it right now. I'm trying to think. So Fox would be desperate to keep it. ESPN wants it because they want everything. Mm-hmm. Turner lost Champions League. I don't see Turner coming in on MLS.
Nope.
Although you never know. I didn't expect him to go in on Champions League. So who knows? Could you get a wild number from a DAZN or somebody like that? You could, but then is the trade-off worth it? And that's what you always come into with this. For whatever reason lately, I've been going back down the rabbit hole of the late night TV battles with first Leno and Letterman trying to succeed Johnny Carson.
It was a great book.
It is, and that led me down the rabbit hole of the Conan O'Brien, Jay Leno one, which there's another good book on that one. So it's the same thing. We'll take it with Letterman, and Conan's deal when he left NBC was about the same thing. Letterman is the prime example because you've got the movie, The Late Shift, and the book, The Late Shift, that goes along with it to back it up. When Letterman was able to solicit pitches from people, not negotiate because he wasn't in a negotiating period, but solicit pitches. You had, at that time, ABC come in. You had CBS, obviously, because that's where he went. You had Fox, which was a whole different animal in the early 90s than it is now. And you had syndicators. Who was going to offer the most money? The syndicators. But who could guarantee the most exposure? CBS. More than anybody else, even Fox, because Fox at that time, and even now, like Fox would sell their 11 o'clock, which would have been the late show, the late night show, whatever. Some networks would take Judge Judy or Maury Povich or whatever instead, or they already had contracts for that. So Fox could give you more money than maybe CBS, but would you get as much exposure? No. Paramount or Disney or whoever was going to syndicate it and do like the Oprah Winfrey show. Could they pay you a ton of money? Yep. Did they want to pay you a ton of money? Yep, because they wanted to go out and sell your show. But could they guarantee you the exposure? Nope. That's the same for a DAZN or Flow FC, which I don't think is even in the mix at this point. But for any of those, would DAZN pay more than ESPN? Yeah, because they have to get you to pay attention to them. But is it the right move? That's a whole different conversation. And I'm with Mike Conte on this. We've talked about this quite a bit. Being on linear TV is very, very important for perception. If you're not, you take a hit.
Yep.
Look at the NHL when they went to Versus. Now, they've bounced back, but how long did it take them to get NBC games? Not being on ESPN hurt them in exposure a huge amount.
Well, even going back to the Sports Channel America contract, from that hurt them initially, and then they had to build back from that. I mean, you had network exposure. Sports Channel America comes in, and their saturation was not network saturation.
They gave you a big check because they were trying to get to that, but they couldn't get there, and you had no guarantee that they could.
Right, and so then when that contract was over, then the NHL has to rebuild from that loss of viewership, try to rebuild their way. Then they have the Versus deal, and then Versus eventually turns into NBCSN, and you get NBC finally as a part of your footprint, but it takes a while to rebuild from all of those missteps that you take from a a broadcast sense going with that network that's not a part of the national discussion, consciousness, saturation, what have you. And having to take that step backward, is it really worth it for you financially in the short term? Probably yes, because they're going to throw that big check at you. But is it worth the effort and the rebuild if things go wrong, and taking those 2 steps back to have to take those 3 steps forward that you wanted to? That's always...
Well, you're not thinking about rebuild. Like,
no.
If you go that way, you're thinking about that's where you're going to live the rest of your days.
Yeah.
And it was a failure. Now, the NHL, when they made the move to Versus, they did take the long route because they learned from the Sports Channel America thing, and they knew, like, hey, we're going to take a hit in the short term. We're going to bring in more money.
I think it was initially an ad share with Versus when they came back in.
What is it now? It's turned into something really good because Versus has turned into NBC Sports Network, which was a much better move, and that then brought NBC into the mix more, and now it's grown as a property, and it's done really well for them. It's a very different time now, obviously, with streaming and the landscape of what linear TV really means. It's not what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So it's definitely more worthy of taking that risk if you want to do it, but it is a risk. Mm-hmm. So that's why, like, could a Amazon or Netflix or DAZN or whoever come in and say, you know what, we want everything, we want exclusivity, and we're going to pay you $500 million to do it every year. Could that happen? Yeah, anything could happen. But would it be the right move? Maybe not yet. And I don't know. That's a very tough decision to make.
And then you also have, don't you have Liga MX, and it's the big 4 that I'll talk about right now, but don't you have Liga MX teams with their own television contracts with the networks themselves?
Yeah,
in addition
you're complicating things now, because we're talking first about MLS's next TV deal. On the Liga MX side, because this move wouldn't happen overnight, we all know that. But on the Liga MX side, the teams do their own deals. They don't have a league deal. That's something that they've talked about, that they would grow the revenues if they do that. But teams that make a lot of money on their own deal don't want to give that up. It's the same thing that happened in La Liga. It's happened in every league around the world. You know, it's a push-pull about it. It's difficult to get there if you didn't start there. MLS started there. Liga MX, Club America doesn't want to give up money to Morelia. And because of the way it's always been done, yeah, I understand it. But for the good of the league, should they do it? Could they maybe make more if they do it in a broader sense? Maybe. I don't know. That's the individual leagues. If you bring it all together under the same umbrella, would you make more money, every team making more money? Possibly. The teams in Liga MX that right now don't bring in much of anything, they would definitely make more money. The teams in MLS all share it equally. Would they make more money? Yeah, I think they're going to make more in their next TV deal. Would a combined deal make more money? Yeah, it should. It should. But how much more? Is it going from $90 million a year to a billion a year, like NFL money? Probably not. Probably not. I think you're probably talking in a combined Super League or combined North American League from a TV rights perspective. If MLS is making 90, I don't know what Liga MX is making because it's team by team. It's very hard to say. Are they making more in the United States? I don't know. In Mexico, I don't know. I don't know what the landscape is. Let's say they are, because the ratings are higher, so that's a safe bet. How much more? I don't know. Would they make more in Mexico with a combined league? Probably not. Would they make more in the United States with a combined league? Yes. But how much? As John has gone off into Star Trek land.
He's back.
He's back. Okay, there we go. Okay, they'd make more. But then this idea, and this is the title of the next section, a Super League is MLS's route into world's elite. Remember what Vincent Janssen said. Liga MX is better than the Eredivisie. He didn't say it was better than the Premier League. The world's elite: England, Germany, Spain, Italy. That's the elite. I don't put France in the elite. Maybe I'm wrong. That's the elite to me. Beyond that, France, Brazil, Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium, Russia. Leagues elite. I think you have to put Liga MX in that. And I think you have to put MLS in that.
Yep.
And I think you probably put Argentina in it for some reasons, mostly because of the talent of the players and the history. You could potentially put some other smaller leagues in Europe in that, maybe some of your Scandinavian leagues, maybe some of your Eastern European leagues that get into that conversation, but that's all jumbled together. France would be at the top of that. But Liga MX, Brazil, Belgium, Netherlands, United States, Russia, Argentina, maybe Colombia, but probably a little bit lower down. As a league, that's probably where it is for me. Yeah. So, I mean, MLS in Mexico's top 12, top 15. Yeah. Liga MX would be a little bit ahead, but could be even higher than we're thinking, because I don't think there's a big gap between Belgium, Netherlands, Russia, MLS, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. I don't think there's a huge gap between any of them. France is further ahead. And if you want to put them in the elite, you could. I don't think they are. I think they're the top of the next group. I think the elite's the four, the big four. Mm-hmm. England, Germany, Spain, Italy. So, if the Super League is MLS's route into the world's elite, and they can't get there on their own. I disagree they can't get there on their own, first off. The main logistical issue is travel. Not really. Mexico and the United States, in terms of travel, even the points made. I mean, New York to Mexico City wouldn't even be among NYC's 5 longest road trips. So would it have some longer trips? Sure, for some teams. For Dallas and Houston, they'd love it. They'd be very happy with this. So the travel's not even much of an issue. The idea about becoming a top 5 league worldwide in 10 years and the very best league in 25 years. On its current trajectory, those projections are absurd, according to Henry Bushnell. I disagree. The very best in 25 years, that's who knows. Top 5 league worldwide in 10 years, I don't think that's absurd. I think it's lofty. I think it's aggressive. I don't think they're quite there. But also, in 10 years, you're talking about post-hosting a World Cup. And that will change the trajectory. So, absurd, I disagree completely. But then this is where you get into it. But imagine for a second that continental super leagues become the norm. I don't think you can imagine that, because I don't think in Europe in the next 5 to 10 years you're going to see a super league. Now, there's going to be more calls for it coming out of this than ever before. And if it was ever going to be realistic to immediately launch into it, it would be coming out of this coronavirus break. I still don't think it happens, because I think the big teams are going to be needed even more domestically to help the teams that are suffering the most from this financially. Because if Real Madrid and Barcelona were out of La Liga and everybody else was left to their own devices, you'd be in a very bad way in Spanish football. If Juve, Inter, Milan, Napoli were not in Serie A, I don't know what the league would look like or how it would even function. So I think from the big team side of it, this would be the time that they would really want to push for it, but I don't think they're going to be able to, because I don't think they're going to be able to get the buy-in for it all to make sense. So let's push that to the side. Now, a North American Super League, it's not the same concept. It's two leagues merging. It's a very different idea. It would be more like if Belgium and the Netherlands decided to merge their leagues, which has been discussed at different points, never really gotten very far. That would make a whole lot more sense. That's the better comparison. Then the question that Bushnell brings up is, what if it becomes the destination league for near elite talent from North and South America? What if somebody like Lautaro Martinez, rather than moving from Racing to Inter Milan at 20, moves to Inter at 18 or 19, Inter Miami, and then Barcelona at 21 or 22? And what if players like Edson Alvarez or Raul Jimenez never leave? Okay, Joseph Martinez, one, would fall into that latter category, and he's showing no signs of leaving. Miguel Almiron in the first category, Ezequiel Barco in the first category. I think you're already seeing movement there. Can it get bigger? Yeah, and that's what we've talked about, growth of MLS. So the idea that you have to partner or merge with Mexico to become the second best league in the world, you can't get there alone. You can in tandem with Liga MX. I don't think becoming partners with Liga MX changes that trajectory. Like having Club America, Chivas, and those teams in the league, does that change Lautaro Martinez's idea of going from Racing to Inter Milan and go to Inter Miami instead, or go to Club America instead? Could that happen without a merger? Yep. Does it give the league maybe a little more heft? Does it give them more money to work with? Sure. But money is not the issue in this. If you do it right, as we saw when it came to Ezequiel Barco. You spent $15 million on a player who stood out in the Copa Sudamericana final and who was, becoming a standout at Independiente. And instead of him going to Europe, he came here instead. And now the idea would be for him to move on from Atlanta in a couple of years, just like it's talked about here, and Atlanta United making money on it. Do more teams in MLS need to find their version of that, whether it's developing talent like Alphonso Davies, which is going to end up being a lucrative one for Vancouver, or going out and buying young talent and spending the money to get the young talent that can net a big return? Because it's very different buying Ezequiel Barco for $15 million and expecting to sell him for $30 than buying a player who's valued at $3 million and expecting to sell him for $30. That's far more of a lottery ticket, right? Mm-hmm. If you buy somebody who is established as a top talent and you expect to sell them for a large amount, that's a little more likely. It's not a guarantee, but it's far more likely. Do MLS teams that have the means maybe need to be more aggressive in that? Yeah. And that's why you have an under-22 initiative now, right? That could factor into that. So, I mean, this idea that MLS can't be, valid without doing this, I disagree with. I think from an MLS perspective, they would have to figure out, is this the right move? Or can we do more on our own? Can we partner without going to a full Super League? Can we have a hybrid where we have a, more like a Champions League that goes alongside of our domestic competitions? That's I think the more likely scenario. So his Super League idea, we'll run through this real quick because I've rambled on enough. His idea was to create an 18-team league above MLS and Liga MX. They don't disappear. You have 10 teams from MLS, 8 from Mexico. You'd play a 34-game regular season. Top 4 would make the playoffs. So then you say your regular season and playoffs have legitimate value. Mexico and their Liga would argue with you about what legitimate value truly is, because they do really well with their Liga from a value perspective, from an interest perspective, and 8 of 18 make it. But his idea then, you would have the two worst MLS teams would be relegated into MLS. The 2 worst Mexican teams would be relegated into Liga MX. So 2 of 8 would go back into the domestic competition of the Mexican teams. 2 of 10 would go back into the domestic competition for MLS. MLS would be 20 teams. Liga MX would be 12 to 16. So he would be then promoting some of these second division teams that right now are not all that viable. You know, Atlante is an older club that could come back, but you know, Oaxaca, Leones Negros, a reconstituted Veracruz, Zacatecas. I mean, it would... See, this is the question. Those leagues, without the top teams, would a Mexican competition of Atlante, Atlas, Atlético San Luis, Juárez, León, Lobos, Morelia, Necaxa, Oaxaca, Puebla, Querétaro, Santos, Tijuana, Leones Negros, Veracruz, Zacatecas, would that be interesting? Would that draw money? It would be interesting to a degree, but would it draw money? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
probably
not.
No,
the only teams that it would quote unquote draw money for are the ones that are actually owned by media outlets that would be broadcasting those games. And I think
but then that you have to do everything together, so it wouldn't be the same conversation, because they could be owned by a media company, but that media company might not have the rights because it'd be sold differently. Because you'd never do the Super League and then allow teams to sell individual rights.
Right.
There'd be no point to it.
Yeah.
The idea that Bushnell has would be that revenue is shared, you know, between everybody. So the domestic leagues and the Super League, all of it would go into one pot and be shared. Would that be agreed upon? Would Club America, Monterrey, Tigres, Chivas, would they agree to that? I don't know. MLS,
yeah.
You know, does your pot get bigger? Yeah, could. That's also going to be diluted more.
Yes.
And that's a very important consideration. So I just... There's things about it that I have to question here. Would you be able to sell this to MLS owners? You could. This is different than creating promotion relegation with an MLS. Although you still could sell that in a different way, I think. His idea is that, you know, the way you'd sell it would be your floor is the status quo. We're raising the ceiling or giving you access to something better. So it's not saying that you would be relegated out of MLS. It's that you would have the potential to move into a Super League. Okay. Get it. All the revenue is still going to be shared. MLS could create a first and second division between themselves, and you're not going to be relegated out of MLS. You're just going to be promoted into the top division in MLS, but all the money's still going to be shared. And that's another possible consideration for MLS, because I think the idea in this article is that MLS desperately needs this. I disagree. I think Liga MX, honestly, on the whole, needs it more than MLS does.
Yes.
Because I think MLS is headed in the right direction. They are taking a conservative route to get there, but they are heading in the right direction to where they don't need it. They will get there on their own. It might take longer, but they will give up a good bit if they do this. If they do it in a true merger perspective. If they do it in Leagues Cup becoming more like the UEFA Champions League, or even, probably more realistically, like the expanded version of the Champions League that's been floated, where you've got groups of 6 or 7, and you're playing not 6 games in a group stage, but you're playing, 10 or 12. That's what I could see the Super League being. Is more along the lines of that, to where now that's going to have an effect on the Open Cup, that's going to have an effect on the Copa MX. Those are things that have to be considered. But if you're playing your domestic campaign combined with playing another 10 to 14 guaranteed games, and this is where you'd have to get both leagues on the same page, and how the numbers would look, how the groups would be determined, stuff like that. But if you have a home and away group stage of groups of 5 or 6, preferably 6, and you're getting 10 additional games on top of your regular season, guaranteed, before you get to knockouts with it, I think then you get the best of both worlds. That way, MLS has another way to make money, and that would be lucrative too. I think that would be very lucrative. And Liga MX wouldn't have to find a way to become, the Three Musketeers and, all for one for all, because they're not built that way. And I don't think their mega clubs would really want to do it that way.
No.
So I think not this idea, but a expanded version of the UEFA Champions League that MLS and Liga MX does on its own would be the way to do it. That way CONCACAF doesn't have to change their Champions League. It can be the same format. You can figure out the scheduling for it. This would be more like if the current schedules stay the same in terms of calendar year, and who really cares about Mexico, because in terms of their format, it doesn't matter if you say their season starts in August or starts in January. You're doing 2 split seasons anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But you would have group stage games in the first half of the year after CONCACAF Champions League finishes. And you'd have to figure out how to make all that work from a calendar perspective, and that's going to be a little tricky. You might even get to where CONCACAF Champions League starts at the round of 8 as opposed to the round of 16, because MLS and Liga MX might want more weeks for their competition. That's going to be more lucrative. And that's going to be something that CONCACAF is going to have to find the balance on. I don't think CONCACAF's making a ton of money on CONCACAF Champions League. They could expand the CONCACAF League if they wanted to and figure that out. Maybe you have to figure out a partner way to do it, where you have CONCACAF can have 2 teams come in. If the last team that was the highest ranked team from the CONCACAF Champions League the year before, they get into this. So you add in a Saprissa, you add in a Motagua, an Olympia, and to help make up the numbers. Maybe that's the way you get CONCACAF's buy-in. That would be interesting. But this would be the longer form competition for teams that can do it and want it, but still keep their domestic identities, because I think they want that too. That's my proposal anyway.
I had it as I was thinking it through. I'm with you in not merging the leagues, but expanding current competition to where it's its own standalone, where you don't have MLS teams giving up their identity, you don't have Liga MX giving up their identities and their contracts and all this kind of stuff. You're still keeping the base that you're familiar with and building your own leagues however you're building it, but just having this as a separate competition to determine the Uber North and South America Canadian champion kind of thing.
Because here's my thing. If you merge it all together, are the TV, because the TV money is going to drive it, is the TV money going to be so much more that it's going to benefit all 50-ish teams to do it that way? I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
But if you create a new competition,
yes, and
you sell your current competitions, which MLS is going to make more money on their next deal, and you would expect they'd make more money on the following deal. Liga MX has talked about working together on TV rights. Will they, won't they, who knows? But you would expect that numbers would go up because ratings continue to go up as they're exposed in the United States. By doing this, would it raise the Liga MX potential ability to sell TV money by having more exposure in the United States? Yes. For MLS, having more competition and more games that are meaningful, would that potentially make MLS a more attractive TV property? I think it would, because then I think it would attract more players. It would do all of the different things that are talked about here, but it would be the more valid way, because if you throw everything into one pot, is there more money to work with in the pot? Yes, but it's divided much further. If you create a new competition, which is creating a new pot, and then that's divided up, would your original pot also get bigger because of the new pot next to it? I think it would.
I think it would.
So I think you'd end up bringing in more money by being separate but having a Champions League like in Europe, like the Copa Libertadores, but more like the way it's been talked about being expanded, because those teams, it's the same conversation that they're having. You know, the idea they're not going to be able to get a Super League done because of history, because of tradition, because those big teams are needed in their domestic leagues. What's the compromise? Having more European games. Not creating like a second group stage like they've done before, but having larger groups in the Champions League. That's the way to do this. So at a minimum, you're creating groups of 6, in my opinion. Now, you've got to figure out the numbers, and that's where maybe CONCACAF comes into play, and you put it up for an opportunity for a Saprissa, an Olimpia, a Motagua to win their way into it. Because that'd be transformative for those teams, potentially, to get a share of that money, but also to get those games. That'd be wild.
No doubt. Yep.
That'd be great for CONCACAF. And that way, because CONCACAF Champions League isn't the UEFA Champions League, it doesn't have the same meaning, it would be somewhat secondary, but it would be another trophy. And you'd still want to win it, because that's your route to the World Club Cup and all that. But your money is going to be driven by this North American Super League that would be a minimum of 10 games additionally. If you don't get out of the group, you're still getting 10 more games. And some of them are going to be big ones. Not all of them, because, again, you're going to have a Colorado-Tijuana game. And is that going to be a huge lucrative thing for the Colorado Rapids? Might be okay, actually. But you're going to have some that just don't really move the needle. That happens. But you're going to have some that do. And you're going to get drawn into groups with, Colorado having Club America come into town and packing out Dick's Sporting Goods Park. Or San Jose, getting Chivas come into town and packing out Avaya. You're going to get those things. So I think that's the way to go, is create a new competition. Don't sacrifice the 2 existing domestic leagues.
Yep.
Create a new one. Bring in a new pot of money. I think your original pots of money are going to grow because of the new pot, because everything has been elevated. And it's the best way forward for all concerned.
Agreed. And for the record, 2 years ago, the combined league rights for Liga MX, domestic and international, were $110 million US.
That was when?
2 years ago, 2018.
2 years ago, that was 2018?
Mm-hmm.
The MLS deal was older than that, and they got 90. And that's not including the international side.
Yeah, the domestic and international, 2018, $110 million US.
Again, this goes back to the idea that MLS is so bad that it would need to be, hat in hand going to do this. Where'd you get that number?
Oh, you had to ask me that. It was an article that I dug up and trying to find out what the rights fees were. Hang on, efforting.
Okay. Well, that's all good. No, I'm not. I mean, it's there. Is it accurate? We don't know. I mean, we're not seeing the checks. But if that's the case, and MLS was getting 90, and we don't know what they were getting internationally, and Liga MX was getting 110 across the board, and not every team is sharing in that the same way. That also has to be factored in here. That's not as big of a disparity as you think.
FMF State of Mind, January 23rd, 2018.
And they're good. I mean, they're getting it from somewhere, but that's credible. So keep that in mind when people say, like, oh, MLS has to do this because they need it so bad. Maybe not. Maybe not. I think both would benefit from it, but you create it in a way that doesn't take away from the domestic. Outside of having to schedule and figure out your schedules, do you maybe then, because you're going to play 10 more games in this competition, do you maybe want to get to 32 games? Do you want to get to a 30-game regular season? Maybe. I'd hope you don't. And, you're going to have to definitely increase the amount of spending on your rosters, but you're going to have more money to work with because you've created a new pot. For me, that's the big fallacy of creating a Super League versus the rest, because what do leagues and teams always look for? New revenue streams.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to combine revenue streams. They want new revenue streams. I want a new competition to sell. I don't want to take away from my domestic competition.
Yep. Clubs' rights deals in the U.S., or quoting from the article, are estimated to have a combined worth of $110 million a year. And as Norteamericanos' interest in soccer grows, Liga MX is in a unique position to capitalize on this.
Well, hold on. You said in the U.S., 110.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's not including what they've sold in Mexico and internationally, which I don't know what else they sell internationally, to be honest. I don't think there's a ton of other money coming. I think MLS is making more internationally than Liga MX.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's not including what they make from Mexican media partners.
No, that is...
All right, that's a very important element. So that's why I questioned it. That's why I was like, wait a minute, 110 is everything? That doesn't seem right. So 110 in the U.S.
U.S., yes.
Whatever they're getting additionally in Mexico, then it's a good bit more than what MLS is doing. But again, that's not everybody making the same amount, and I think even those teams would rather have a new pot of money than maybe have a slightly larger individual pot. Because are you going to make more money for the North American Super League TV rights? Let's say you do what Bushnell's promoting here, where you have a Super League and you have the domestic leagues that are diluted. Are you going to make more money by having that, the Super League, which would make a big amount, more than either one would make on their own, and then a small amount for their domestic leagues? Because you're not going to get the same MLS TV money, you're not going to get the same Liga MX TV money if the top teams are not playing in that league. That's a fact. So are you going to get more by those three things coming together, or are you going to get more by MLS growing as you're expected to grow in the next deal, Liga MX growing as you would expect it would in the next deal, and adding a new bucket? I think the latter is what's going to make you more money.
I've always thought that adding an additional bucket would make more money. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. I mean, when it comes to whatever business you're talking about, but specifically not diluting what you have in front of you, adding something else that is an additional competition or element to your business, that's going to make you more money, and then encourage those who are currently involved in whatever you're doing with your original partners to understand the interest that's being engaged with the new competition to help increase that as well.
That's the way I would see it. I think it's the better approach. So I think it's the more realistic approach is the more important thing here. That ended up being a long conversation on the Super League. I did not expect to go that deep into it, but I think that's the more realistic way for this to happen. And I think it's the most beneficial way for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, but at the same time, yes, it was a discussion about the Super League, but it was also a discussion about where Liga MX is currently in the soccer landscape when it comes to their product, and where MLS has been going right now on the world stage when it comes to their product, and the economics that are involved, and the economic history that's involved, and the franchises that have each individual piece of what they've grown over time. And yes, it's two separate ways of growing, but the difficulties in, if you wanted to merge those ideas, the difficulties in wanting to do that because of how business is being done in Liga MX versus how business is being done in MLS, and the issues that we see financially involving the league when it comes to Liga MX because of what they've done in suspending ProRel, and the folks in the Liga Ascenso not being short of maybe one or two of those 12 franchises wanting to be a part of the future, and all of the issues that is involved there, and the thought that in this new version of a locked-in Liga MX, that what you want to do is find the lower three teams and then have that help the Ascenso, instead of having those teams that are at the bottom of the table taking that find money and investing it in yourself to make you better. You're basically penalizing the bottom three teams and sending it to the Ascenso. It's just a lot of economics that don't make any sense, and then trying to merge those two ideas instead of keeping what's there and building off of the relationship that you have instead of trying to mix oil and water at some points.
Yeah, I think the conversation for so many starts from the idea that MLS is desperate and needs this, and I'm not buying it. I don't think they do. I don't think Liga MX needs it either. I think both can benefit from working together in a more expanded way, and creating this new competition would be that way to do it, as opposed to merging operations completely.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like the idea of adding more instead of merging A and B and then coming up with AB, and it might not be a good mix.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head's at. Okay.
So we agree.
Yeah. It happens occasionally. It does.
More than people know, actually.
Yeah, a lot more. Anyway. All right. We are done for the day. You guys have thoughts on that? Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. We'll talk about some of your thoughts on tomorrow's show, but we'll also tweet at you a little bit as well. You'll hear from Nofo Brewing tomorrow. You will hear from Mike Conti tomorrow. Stoppage time will be tomorrow at 2 o'clock on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. And we will continue to do our thing. We'll keep you posted on stuff as it breaks, and we'll be back in the morning. Mucho platio.
Mucho platio.